Great. So today is about investing and saving, or saving and investing, whichever way you want to go. So I thought we'd start off with a little bit of stock market trivia. So tell me, anybody know what the big board is? Liz, what is it?
Isn't that the board where they post all the things that are being traded on the floor at any given time?
And so what is the real name? This is the big board is the nickname.
He who
So
makes my life awful and shall not be named.
no, good one. It's the stock market. It's the New York Stock Market Exchange, New York Stock Exchange. And interestingly enough, it's not only the New York Stock Exchange is both the first and most popular stock exchange in the world, and it's the largest in the United States. The reason that we talk about Wall Street is because the stock market is actually located at 11 Wall Street in New York City, New York. And it opened for the first time in 1792. So our second trivia quiz question is, why are some companies known as blue chip? So when you're looking to invest, people say always invest in the blue chip stocks. Anybody know why that is? Must not have very many poker players, or you don't want to admit to it. Um, so it's the prestigious name that is reserved for companies that are nationally known and traded high on the stock market. So it's derived from the highest value um, poker chip, which is blue. So that's why we call them blue chips. For many, many years, the blue chip stocks never changed. They were the same blue chip stocks forever. But with global trading and a number of new things coming on board and all of the technology, we've seen a change in those blue chip stocks. As of today, the blue chip stocks include American Express, Apple, Disney, Home Depot, and Johnson & Johnson, although we're not sure how long the Johnson & Johnson will stay there based on the sadness with that piece. I want to remind you that, again, this has a twofold purpose. The first is to provide you with information that will allow you to be comfortable in your own personal financial skin. And secondly, to be able to provide you with resources and tools to have conversations with students about all of these money management tips and tricks. And so I will again periodically suggest to you that something that we're doing in this workshop is appropriate to do specifically with students, or how we might start the conversation with students in those particular situations. So we started out with the psychology of money, talking about our money history, about our money mantra, about our money mindset. And then we focused on spending and financial planning last week. And so one of your challenges, your personal financial wellness challenges from last week, was to use a spending diary. And so I'm curious, by a show of hands or a shout out, did any of you do the spending diary activity? Because it's a perfect precursor to today. If you haven't done the spending diary, I'm going to encourage you, thanks, Sherry, to think about, again, those spending leaks, because I love the Excel sheet, because here's the difficulty. We oftentimes run into people who say, well, I can't save, let alone invest. I mean, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I don't know what you're talking about here. And we feel like we just don't have anything left after we pay our bills and cover our expenses. We're going to talk today specifically about how to reframe that. And one of the first things we need to know is, what are our spending leaks? Because that's the disposable income that we'll be able to use. So as I say each week, it's important for you to do a little self-check about the topic, so you get really in your own mind, how do you feel about this topic? Because remember, our money history impacts our relationship with money. Everyone's history is different, even within the same family. So for some of us, saving money is a habit that we learned and practiced at an early age. So my story is that I was a saver. Oh my gosh, I loved saving. And I would figure out all sorts of things to do in order for my parents to pay me pennies and things like that. And I had a piggy bank, and I insisted that my parents take me to the local bank. It was a community bank in our small community, at least twice a month on a Saturday, so I could deposit my pennies into my account. And that was back in the day. And I wish they still did it because I think there's a visual tactile piece to this, that they would actually give you a passbook. They would handwrite what you deposited, and then they'd do the math, and then you'd know how much you had in your little space. Well, I really thought that I just had my own little space at the bank because that made sense to me. I was 6 or 7, and that it had my name on it, and that I could go in any time and open up the drawer, and there would be all my pennies. Because why would you think otherwise? So one day I got rather bold with my mom because she said, "Hey, would you like to meet Mr. Strayhorn?" Was his name. Very tall, sort of string bean looking guy, very kind, but scared me because I was very small and he was very tall. And she said, "Would you like to meet the bank president?" And I said, "Yes." And then he said, "Would you like to go into the vault?" Well, of course I did because I knew what was in the vault. It was my space, my box with my name on it, and I could now look at all my pennies. So into the vault we leapt, and I looked around and I couldn't find my box. And I said, "Well, where is my money?" And there was a stunned silence, and I could sense that my mom and Mr. Strayhorn were looking at each other over my head. And I said, "No, I mean, where's my box with all my pennies? I've been coming here for years, probably 2 or 3." There was no response. And I had one of those meltdowns. I had one of those situations where I absolutely had a temper tantrum inside the vault because I wanted to know where my money was, and I had lost all trust in banking. I got over that, but it was a shocking experience for me because I thought all I was doing was just bringing my money into a safer place. So think about how you feel about saving. Um, Sometimes saving isn't part of our history. And whether saving is or investing is, the real thing is that starting today, you and your students can start to save and you can invest for your future. So that's the exciting piece. Whatever your history is, if you want to change it, we can do that today. So let's look at our learning objectives for today. We've got a packed piece here. So it looks, Maria, like I need to have access to share.
Sorry about that. You should be good now.
That's okay. Perfect. So our learning objectives today are, first of all, to differentiate between saving and investing. Sometimes we use those words interchangeably, like I'm going to invest in myself, or let's invest in this, let's save for. So we're going to figure out the difference. We're going to explain the purpose of PYF. We're also going to discuss the significance of the time value of money. And we're going to explore how personal risk tolerance relates to investment decision making. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to start off with who wants to be a millionaire? We're going to look at emotional barriers, saving and investing, PYF. Ooh, my favorite, emergency funds. We're going to look at compound versus simple interest and risk and reward. So right now, oops, forget that piece there. Don't pay any attention to that on the bottom there, because what actually is going to happen is that Maria is going to put into the chat box the link to the writable Who Wants to Be a Millionaire quiz. So should take you about, less than 5 minutes. It's just a true or false. There are 10 questions. So if you would take a moment to access that particular quiz, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, then we can find out exactly what it takes to be a millionaire. And again, disregard this link on my slide. That is an oversight on my part.
Sorry, looks like I copied let me try this link one more time. Sorry, y'all. Wondering if caps matter. Oh, CJ, do you mind putting that slide back up? I think I copied the link wrong in the chat.
Okay, so that's not the right link.
Oh,
You have it yourself. I thought you'd put it in the chat box.
Oh.
It was one of the handouts.
Oh, it's which, sorry, is it the 52-week?
It's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Okay, I'm sorry, that was my bad.
That's okay.
Friday technical difficulties. Sorry, y'all, my internet's being a little slow. Okay, there we go. For those of us that just joined, we're just doing the millionaire quiz. I'll reattach that in the chat.
Sorry about that. I got lost for a moment. So give you a few more minutes on that quiz. So feel free to unmute and shout out your answer. Our first question is, a millionaire is someone who has a yearly income of $1 million or more. What do we think?
False.
False.
False is correct, because a millionaire is really someone who has a net worth of $1 million or more. So it's not that you have to keep making $1 million every year. 80% of millionaires inherited their money. Number 2. What do you say? Some people are saying true. Only about 19% of millionaires were given any money or wealth from their families. So these are, shows that anybody can do it. Approximately 2/3 of millionaires are self-employed. We've got some falses, trues. It is true. 75% of millionaires are self-employed and consider themselves to be entrepreneurs. And I want to stop there and say that that doesn't necessarily mean that they invented something amazing. We'll find out a little bit later where they're, some of them are employed. And this one had a little typo on it because it's really because of their wealth. Most millionaires work less than 40 hours per week, not obviously 40 years per week, if you saw that typo. So what do you think? How hard do they work?
False.
It is false. They normally work about 45 to 55 hours per week. Number 5, most millionaires are college graduates. Interesting enough, it's true. So 80% are college grads, 24% have earned master's or doctoral degrees, 14% have earned medical or law degrees. Most millionaires carry an American Express Gold card, then a credit card from Sears. And we know that Sears is going out of business, but what do you think? Do they have the American Express or the card from Sears?
Sears.
28% or 29 almost of millionaires have an American Express Gold card. 43% have a Sears card. Number 7, single people are often more millionaires than married people.
False.
It is false. Millionaires tend to be married and stay married. Number 8, the majority of millionaires drive a current model of a luxury import car.
False.
That is absolutely correct. Only 23% of millionaires drive a current year car. They pride themselves actually on having some old clunkers. 9.4% drive a Ford and 8.8% drive a Cadillac. Number 9, most millionaires work in glamorous jobs such as sports, entertainment, or high tech. We've got a resounding no, and that is correct. Most millionaires work in very ordinary jobs. They are paving contractors or have a pest control business. And our last one, many poor people become millionaires by winning the lottery. Got some real head shakes on no. That is correct. The odds of winning 1 million or more in a lottery are 1 in 12 million. The odds of a woman giving birth to quadruplets is 1 in 700,000. So one of the things I love about this particular activity is that this is a great conversation starter for students, because most of us believe that we could never possibly be a millionaire, either based on our money history, based on our current situation. And in absolute reality, any one of us could choose to be a millionaire. So it's about choice and it's about setting goals. So having students get a real sense of, oh my gosh, this is possible, is really a great opportunity to talk to them about, because who doesn't want to be a millionaire in today's environment? But let's talk a little bit about exactly what the key to being a millionaire is. And this is something that every millionaire will share with you, because this is the reality of it. And the key, live within your income. Better yet, live below your income. So that's the secret that millionaires will share with you, that's how they do it. You know that there is always a story, not always, but about once a year, you pick up a newspaper or read on the internet that maybe it's a custodian, maybe it's a lunchroom attendant, but someone who you think is probably making minimum wage and has been for quite some time, they die and they leave $1 million to the high school or the grade school for a new music room or a new track. And people go, wow, they must have inherited. No, they've just been living their life within their income and putting the extra in savings. So this information, if you're interested, these are 2 really good reads. They're quick, they're sort of fun. But The Millionaire Next Door and The Millionaire Mind, I think I've got, oh, I don't have them on my bookcase that are looking outward. But Thomas Stanley has done a lot of research in this area. So again, if you're interested, pick up a copy from Amazon or your local library and take a moment to read through. There are also great books to share with your students, because what it really does is make the point that we want to make, which is that you can become wealthy despite your socioeconomic status as of today. So it's within everyone's reach, but it's back to that secret: live within your income, or better yet, live below. Well, you might be surprised that there are numerous barriers to saving and investing, and they happen to be emotional barriers. Our first emotional barrier is simply our risk tolerance. So we all have a certain level of risk which we're comfortable with, and that's called our risk tolerance. Sometimes our risk tolerance is impacted by our age, could be our gender, could be our current income, might be our financial goals. So it's important anytime that we are looking at saving or investment to take into account our risk tolerance, the tolerance we have today. However, sometimes it's good to get a little bit out of that comfort zone, as long as it's a calculated risk. The next barrier is that now versus future focus. So we live in a now society. We like things to happen quickly. I mean, Jeff Bezos was no fool when he decided he would create Prime and we can get almost anything we want without leaving our house in 24 hours or less. We like things to happen quickly. We often change course if we don't get immediate results. Well, saving and investing are really best practice with a long-term outlook. So just like it's easy to put off doing the dishes or mowing the lawn, it's also easy to put off saving and investing. I'm just going to wait until I have enough to put into my savings account, many people say. But we'll see today that the sooner you start saving, regardless of the amount, the better we can create a habit and the better off we'll be. So again, talking to your students, talking to your family, talking to yourself, it's never about the amount, it's about the habit. Can I start something and keep going with it? Can I be consistent? Another emotional barrier is simply procrastination. We all know if we have this as one of our favorite things to do, I'll do it tomorrow. But this is oftentimes the fact that, I don't feel like I have enough money today to put a little bit away. So I think that I'll wait until I get a raise or whatever it is about that. Oftentimes what we're really doing is we're saying, I don't know anything about investing, so I'm going to put that off until I have time to research. Well, that makes sense, but don't put it off. Start looking today about investments and learning all that you can. There's so much information available today. You really can't use this excuse by saying, I don't know anything, because it's all out there for you to reach. The last emotional barrier is simply choice. We don't even recognize it as a barrier because we think choice is a good thing, and it usually is. But when we have so many choices, it's overwhelming. We really can only compare two things at once. So we might want to just start with one or two goals and focus on financial tools that are best suited to that goal. So for example, if our goal is to save for a house, maybe we want to look into mutual funds. If we want to save for a used car, then maybe we should stay with a savings account or a certificate of deposit. But if we can just focus on one goal at a time, it makes it much more manageable. So let me stop there and just make sure that we're all on the same page. Any questions about these emotional barriers? Okay, they're pretty out there and real. So, and I can certainly tell you that I've succumbed to several of those emotional barriers throughout my life. Hard to always be right on target. Well, let's take a look at saving, because that's what we're talking about today as one of our focuses. So here's the definition of saving. It means putting money aside in low risk options for short-term goals. It allows us to have access to money quickly and easily with very little or no risk that you'll lose anything that you put aside. So whether you're putting you're saving your change in a jar like this picture, or you're taking that jar every other week to the bank, this is the opportunity to have quick access. And we call savings, for the most part, liquid. It means that we can go to the ATM, we can get our money out of our savings account anytime, and there won't be a penalty. And that's what we're looking for. We want it for our short-term goals. We want to be able to get to it quickly, and we want to be able to also watch it grow, but with little or no risk. Now, obviously, because it's low risk, we're not going to get much return on our investment. But if we make a plan, we can take our savings, we can build that up, then we can move it into a certificate of deposit, which, because you're letting the bank use your money for a set period of time, they're going to pay you more for that opportunity. So now I'm getting a little bit more interest, a better rate of return, and I can build that up. So you can watch that sort of linear continuum so that you can go savings account, certificate of deposit. Now I'm ready to do mutual funds. So it doesn't have to be all done at once. We can make a plan. Well, then let's look at what investing is. Well, investing means putting money into assets that have historically earned a higher rate of return than our common saving products. But it does involve risk. And you can't get your funds out. You can't go anyplace. There's not a brokerage open that's got an ATM that you can suddenly sell your stock and get it immediately. That's the whole point. You're paying for the opportunity for someone else to use your money, and they're not going to give it back to you quite so quickly. There also could be a penalty. So even with a certificate of deposit, you might have taken a certificate of deposit out for 2 years thinking that you wouldn't need any of that money. And then you didn't quite plan as well as you hoped for. And wow, you need that certificate of deposit now. Well, you certainly are going to get your money back, but you're also probably going to have to pay a penalty for redeeming it before the time is up. So 2 different things to think about, but let's cut to the chase. Why would I do either? Last week we talked about spending. So why don't I just spend? Well, the first thing is we need to stay ahead of inflation. And when we think about inflation, we have to think about the fact that prices increase. So when the fast food burger goes from $2.50 to $3, or when gas goes from $2.75 to $3.05, or whatever it's up to now, that's inflation. We just keep watching those prices increase. But guess what? Our salary doesn't seem to increase that quickly as we'd like. So now we're paying more with the same amount of money that we've got. So we need to make more money just to keep up with the rising cost of living. The other piece of the puzzle is an emergency fund. And we need an emergency fund. So we talk about a concept called financial fragility. Financial fragility, many of us experienced it as soon as the pandemic hit. Some of us continue to experience it. No stigma to it. The fact is that what financial fragility is across the nation is if you were to ask yourself or your students, could you come up with $400 this month if you had an emergency? And that could be, can I sell something? Can I borrow? Do I have money in my savings? Well, more than half of those individuals that were, and this was a huge survey, it's done every year, the response to that question was, are you kidding me? $400? No, I can't come up with that. So that's where the emergency fund comes in. And I believe as one of the handouts that you received was an emergency fund calculation. So I'm going to pull that up so that you can see it. We're not going to do it right now because I actually can't do CPR as quickly as I could if we were all in the same room. And you might need CPR when you do this. But this is what I'm looking at, and you have access to. Yours is a writable fillable. But this is part of your personal financial wellness. How much do you need in your emergency fund? So this is an assignment I hope that you'll take advantage of and complete it, because we need to find out what's the total amount you need to keep in your emergency fund. So that was part of your participant materials that Maria sent out to you. So I hope that you can grab that and enjoy it. Well, enjoy is perhaps a little bit strong. That you can complete it is probably what I should say. The rule of thumb used to be that you needed 3 months of your living expenses in an emergency fund. Well, actually, the rule of thumb was 6. But that rule of thumb of 6 months put people into an absolute frenzy, because that's a lot of money for some of us. And you're thinking, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and how am I going to get a 6-month emergency fund? Are you nuts? So then we backtracked and said, okay, can you get 3 months in? Well, Susie Orman, you may like her or dislike her. That's not relevant at the moment. But Susie Orman just came out and said that we should all have 12 months in an emergency fund. Now, I'm going to say that Susie Orman has a lot of things going for her, but I think that's crazy. There is no way that most of us can have in a savings account 1 entire year. And is that a beautiful goal to go after? I'm not denying it. It would be amazing. But that sounds overwhelming to me if I'm just starting out saving. So I'm going to backtrack and say, let's stick with at least that 3 months. And that's something you build towards. It's not something that you can just put in today. But if we started building that savings account, that emergency account, and let me make sure that you understand that a savings account and an emergency account are 2 different things. We need them both. So never the twain shall meet. We want our emergency fund that is really for emergencies. We're not dipping into it for a Christmas present or a trip out of town. It's for the emergency, and emergencies might look like a gift or a trip, but they aren't. We're talking about that car, the radiator that blows up. We're talking about the furnace in your house that no longer works. We're talking about those things that you need to fix immediately in order to live. So then I need my savings account, because my savings account is where I'm saving for my short-term goals. It's where I'm saving for that new TV. It's where I'm saving for that trip out of town. So let's make sure that one of the things when we talk with our students, we want to make certain that they recognize those 2 different aspects of it. Any questions or concerns about an emergency fund? It's pretty heavy stuff when you do the calculations. So I encourage you to do that, and then recognize that we just have to start somewhere. So the other reason that we save or invest is absolutely to achieve our financial goals. So if we do this right, if we create that financial stability, which is really goal number 1, then we can start making plans for our other goals. People who have a financial plan, research shows that they usually live a comfortable life within their means, and they don't have to worry about having enough money for the things they need and want. Well, how does somebody get started? Well, it's back to the secret code, which is PYF. Anybody know what that stands for? Just shout it out.
Pay yourself first.
Pay yourself first. Absolutely. And that is the number 1 rule. Now, that can somewhat seem disconcerting to say to a student, because you're asking them to also pay their bills, and you're saying it to yourself, and you're thinking, well, that's sort of selfish. I've got all these other things I need to do. This is the number 1 key, is to pay yourself first. Because the first thing we have to do is to decide that it's important to put money aside. And there are just so many of us that say, I don't think I can save. I can't do it today. I can't do it until this happens and this happens and this happens. But we need to start thinking of saving as a necessity. So the secret to that is to pay yourself first. So we have to establish savings as a priority, not as, oh, I'll do that next month. When I have a little bit money ahead, I'll do that. Or when I get the bonus, or when I get the tax refund. Nope. It's let's make that a priority today. Then it's encouraging a sound financial habit. That's what paying yourself first does. And it builds a cash buffer with real world applications. So how do you do it? Well, again, I'm going to say it over and over again to the point of where you're going to go, oh, CJ, can you stop? But it's not the amount that counts. It's the habit. So if what you can put away today, and you say to yourself after this class, okay, I'm going to put $5 away. That's fabulous. If what you can say to yourself is, I can put $1 away. Yes. If you can put $50 away. Yes. But you need to make it a fixed expense on your spending plan. You need to create that habit. Well, how can you do that? Well, there's some things that technology has set up for us. I can do a payroll deduction, possibly. If I can't do a payroll deduction, I can set up with my bank an automatic electronic funds transfer from my checking to my savings. And I can set that up any day. I can set that up to be always on the 15th. I can set that up to be always on payday. And I can decide that, $5 is it, or I can decide it's 75. Write yourself a check. Probably haven't written a check to anybody for a long time, but you probably have some checks lying around. So write yourself one and then deposit it. Maybe you've got a savings jar or a savings envelope. And so sometimes people like that whole envelope idea. So they've got an envelope for their rent. They've got an envelope for their utilities. They've got an envelope for their pay yourself first. And they can see it. They just keep putting the cash in and they can see it all. Some of us like to have that savings jar so that we can see that money build up. Whatever visual you need, take advantage of it. And yes, you're going to laugh and think, gosh, I thought this babe believed in banking. Well, I do. But if nothing else, put it under your mattress. Find some place to save. So in addition to those ideas, I bet you have some of your own. If you're getting a tax refund, can you put some of that into the savings? One of the most interesting things about pay raises is that we love pay raises. And we say to ourselves before it comes, I'm going to put that little bit, it's always a little bit, that little bit more than I got on my check, I'm going to put that in savings. And if we don't, then by the third month, we have figured out how to spend our raise. We got right up to the top again. We're right up to the end of that paycheck. Why? Because we're human. I might put that bonus I got, or maybe I clip coupons. And maybe when I can say to myself, well, all those dollars off I got, I'm going to put those actually into my envelope. Maybe when you send in rebates, put that rebate check, cash it and put it into the bank. Break those habits of going to getting coffee at some coffee place. Limit it to Monday or Friday to treat yourself, and then take your Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, pop it into your savings account. The biggest thing is that if you pay off a debt or you pay off whether it's a credit card or a personal loan, that money isn't for you to spend. Put it in your savings account. You've been managing without it so far, even if it's been sort of icky, but go ahead and take that amount that you used to pay to the creditor and make yourself the creditor. Pay yourself. So think about how you can actually pay yourself first. And I'm going to share with you something that I think is fun. You may all be familiar with it, but it's the 52-week challenge. So again, that's part of your participant handouts. I'm going to pull it up here on the screen. So this is called the 52-week challenge. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is to realize that you've got some choice here. But we start off with week 1, we put $1. Okay. Then we put 2 the second week. Now, sometimes you look at this and you think, well, I'm not sure that I'm actually going to find a week like week 45 and have $45 I can put in all at once. That's okay. But let's say you get a tax refund. Well, it's okay if you zoom over to week 45 and put that $45 in today. It doesn't have to be, I mean, no one's looking, no one's counting, and no one's going to come to you and go, you can't do that week 45. It's not week 45. It's only week 17. No, this is really designed to give you something to look at. The challenge, can you do it? Because look at this, bada bing, this is without any interest, even on any of this money. In 52 weeks, you've got 1,300 buckaroonies. Wow. Now there's something to think about. So again, you might say to yourself, I'm not sure I can do this. Well, create your own challenge. Maybe it's a 12-month challenge. But think about how you can track your savings, because I really do believe, as I told you my savings story when I started the class, that that's something so tangible for children, but it's tangible for adults too. And looking at numbers on paper on my phone or on my computer just isn't quite as tangible to me. So I like to touch and feel and go, wow, look what I've accomplished. I do have that much money in the bank. So this is just something fun for you, but it's also fun for your students because tracking makes that habit stick. Anyone seen that before, that 52-week challenge? Great. Perfect. Well, I encourage you, again, make it so you can actually follow it. So if it's not a week, maybe it's a month, maybe it's a bi-weekly, but something that you can actually sort of make sense out of. Well, this is another one that I absolutely love to talk about. Which
can
is,
I add something?
Yeah.
You brought up the tax refund, and my trick has been when I got a job after coming back to the States, I have 0 when I got the job. Mm-hmm. So my tax refund is always way more than I expected. And I just learned, I just live on what I got because I thought it was great when I started, but so you can change your deduction status. Yeah. And that way also we never got dinged by the state because the state of California was problematic when I was married. So
perfect.
But just
thanks for bringing that up, Liz. Yeah, because I think it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the others. Many people use that as a savings mechanism. And other people say, well, I'm not so sure I want the government to have my money in 12 months. Maybe I'll do it differently. But whatever works for you, but that is one way to absolutely create that savings piece. As long as you put it into savings. And I'm just teasing you. But, sometimes you think, wow, look what I got. Now I'm going to go somewhere. And so maybe you make a commitment to half of it versus all of it. But yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. Well, this is a great activity for students. So let's see how we all do with this question. Oh, that's my emergency fund we just talked about. So pick one. Which would you prefer? If I offered you these choices, $500,000 invested at one time at a set interest rate, or would you pick B, 1 cent doubled every day for a month? Yeah, go ahead and use the chat for that. Appreciate it.
You cheated, Anna. You already knew the answer.
My students do it the total other way. It's rice on a chessboard. Okay.
So the reality is that most of us would go for A because it sure sounds good. And we're talking big buckaroonies that most of us haven't seen at one time. And so I'm really going to take a penny doubled every day. Well, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard. But many of you know the answer to this. By the end of the month, you're in the money. So this is a great opportunity for your students to start beginning to understand, oh, wow, there's something going on here that I didn't know. And that's the important piece, to get that hook. I'm often asked, well, how do I get students interested in this topic? I mean, not only do they not want to talk about it, but how do I engage them? Well, here's a tool that engages them right out of the chute, because this sort of floors everybody that ever looks at this. But let's talk about Einstein. Einstein declared it the greatest mathematical discovery of all time. And that also gets your students to wonder what that is. Well, we're talking about compound interest. Simple versus compound interest. So there are not a lot of organizations, financial organizations, or that use the simple interest idea, but it's still out there. And so you want to make sure that you know what you're talking about. So simple interest is calculated on the original principal only. So no matter how much interest you make, it's still, if you put in $10, they're only paying you interest on that $10 if you just keep that in and add nothing more. Now, compound interest is how we talk about letting your money grow while you're sleeping. So it's calculated each period on the original principal and all the interest accumulated during the past months. So we just took a very easy example, and yes, sadly enough, I'm not sure that anybody's paying 10% anywhere at the moment, but for the purposes of this explanation, we wanted to show it. So we start off the first year, we're still even Steven, whether you're in a simple interest or a compound, we're both at 110. But now it sort of starts to creep up. Year 2, I've got $1 more if I've got compound. Year 3, I've got $3 more. Suddenly I've got 6. And then bada bing, I'm much more than that 150. I've got 161. So it's important for students and for anyone else to be looking at, what's the calculation? Are they paying me just on my original principal, and I don't add anything else to my account forever? Or am I getting that extra boost with my compound interest?
CJ,
Yes,
may I just interrupt real quick? Do you mind,
absolutely.
defining for me and for everyone else, what is meant by principal?
So principal, thanks for asking. Principal is the original amount. So we always talk about the money deposited. We call that principal. So if you put in $10, that's your principal.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Appreciate it. So let's take a look at the rule of 72. Many of you may have heard it. It sounds like it's, wow, how cool is that? The rule of 72. Well, it's not rocket science, but we need to know what it is. So if you are looking at different opportunities to invest, and they're letting you know what kind of rate of return you're going to get, what they're going to pay you, you want to know just exactly how long will it take for your money to double, because we want to watch it grow. So with the rule of 72, you can estimate the growth of funds over time when you're working with compound interest. So we take the number 72 and we divide it by the interest rate you hope to return. And that gives you the approximate number of years it will take for your investment to double. So you can see that we always want to look for that higher percentage, because it takes less time for our investment to double. And we're looking at something for 2%. We're thinking, man, oh man, 36 years for it to double? Yikes, it's a long time. But that's the important thing to understand. How long will it take? And this is the rule. And we always round up. So yes, you could do this yourself and say, well, CJ, I think it's really, 35.8. We got it. But let's go with the rounding up to the year. So the rule of 72 is important. We want to know, as we're looking at our savings accounts, as we're looking at our certificate of deposit, anything that we're looking at that's saying to you, we'll pay you, the organization, the financial institution says, hey, we'll pay you X percent. Well, do your math and say to yourself, okay, or wow, that doesn't sound like the best thing ever. Well, with the rule of 72, here's the lesson that we really want to share with everyone. And that's about the fact that time matters. So you can do all sorts of charts with this. I just did a very fast piece. It's really amazing if you chart it out. But here's Janice and Matt. Both graduated from college. They're both 23 years old, or they're both 21 years old, sorry. And they have an extra $1,000. Maybe they got it as a graduation present. And they can spend it any way they want to. Well, Janice decides that she's going to set up an IRA. So right at the age of 21, she opens up an IRA, and it's got a 7% interest rate. So she puts in $1,000 every year for 44 years. At age 65, Janice has $266,121. Matt decides that he's not going to put the money in now. He's going to do whatever he wants to, maybe travel, maybe buy things, and that's okay. But at 35, he says, it's probably time that I started saving for my retirement. So he puts in $1,000 for a year for 30 years till he reaches 65, and he's got $94,000. Janice has $71,000 more at age 65, and she just was cruising. So what I want you to think about is that the earlier or longer you save, the more savings you will have. And again, not so much the amount, but that you just keep at it. So this sometimes is a difficult concept for our students because, again, savings doesn't sound like there's no immediate gratification. But we do want to think about the fact that time matters. So any questions before we move on? We're going to zip into investing now. Want to make sure that we're all on track and we're all grooving. All right, I got some thumbs up. Well, then let's take a look at some financial risks because there are some and we need to be paying attention. So we look at 5 major risks and we need to be thinking about what they are. These are for our big 5 investment. Well, the first one is the market risk. So if we're going to actually play the big board, then we have to pay attention to the risk with the markets. So they rise and fall, and they rise and fall sometimes based on the economy, sometimes based on investor sentiment. Political events impact the stock market, changing interest rates, changes in the fortunes of companies or industries or other factors. So all investment assets fluctuate to some degree. And this is the type of risk that most people associate with investing because we know that we go up and down, up and down. The second risk is financial. What if the company, so Johnson & Johnson is going through a tough time right now. Their particular COVID-19 vaccine is under question. So we're hoping they're going to bounce back, but some companies go bankrupt. Some of your favorite restaurants aren't there anymore. And if you invested in the holding company that has your favorite restaurant attached to it, that's not going to be a good thing for you. You'll probably get little, if any, of your money back from that investment. So we've got a financial risk. Purchasing power or the inflation risk. And again, we talked a little bit about inflation, and it basically means that the receipt of $1 tomorrow is worth less than the receipt of $1 today. So I can't buy as much tomorrow as I can today. And Ronald Reagan actually considered, he's got a great quote that you'll just have to Google because I can't remember it, but he really considered that inflation was a silent thief. I think he actually used the word mugger over time because it can rob your savings of significant buying power if you're not keeping up with inflation. So we want to earn enough money on our money to stay up with the cost of goods and services as they rise. what this risk is that you're losing more money than you're able to then buy anything with. Our fourth risk is interest rate risk. And this is a much more complicated concept. But the reality is that if you're buying a bond, a government bond for $10,000, it pays 5% interest for 10 years. You get your money back plus 5% interest. But if you need the money in 5 years instead of 10, then it's possible that you won't be able to get that you'll pay a penalty. So you've got to sell your bond at a different price, and you could lose out on that. So the interest rate can fluctuate from what you thought you were going to get and then what you have to then sell it at. So you have to sell your bond at a discount, and then you get less for it. But then there's the fraud risk. And the fact is that somebody's lying to you. Some investments are misrepresented, and it's important for you to investigate before you invest. So Bernie Madoff recently died, I think a couple days ago, in prison. And I want to take a moment just to talk about ponzi schemes, because I think that it's important for you to recognize that the old adage is true. If it sounds too good to be true, 9 out of 10 times it is too good to be true. So when somebody says, hey, Liz, I've got this great opportunity. We can make 26% on our investment. Shh, don't tell anyone though, because I've got this great guy that's going to help us do that, but he doesn't want anybody else to know. Okay, then Liz gets into the deal, and this is how it is. Maria, in this hypothetical situation, is the one we're investing with. And Maria's a smart cookie. So she makes sure that initially we get 26% return. And we're like, whoa. And then Liz and I say, oh gosh, we really want Anna to be in on the deal. And we go to Maria and say, we want to tell Anna, our friend, about this. And Maria says, what did I tell you to? This is a very, very private club. No one else can come. Okay. Then we go back and we say, oh, please, can't we? And Maria says, well, what about this Anna? Does she have enough to invest? Because the investment went up. It's not the original that you two got. We go, yeah. And then we get Anna in the fold. And pretty soon, I mean, come on, the secret, who's making 26% on anything now? But Maria's a smart cookie, as I mentioned, so we're getting paid out. Well, pretty soon, we're noticing that the payments aren't coming quite as consistently. And we think, oh, that's okay. She's busy. And, it's all happening. I mean, all this stuff is going on, and we're raking in the dough. And then Liz contacts Maria and says, so I don't quite understand. I haven't seen the dividend. And Maria goes, oh, wow, yeah. And cuts her a check right away. So now Liz is fine. But then I'm questioning where mine is. And it just keeps going and going. It's called a Ponzi scheme because what Maria is having to do is let more people into the scheme in order to pay the people that got in initially. And pretty soon, although Bernie Madoff was a genius, a criminal genius, he also was found out. But billions of dollars he was able to move around like a shell game. So the reality is that for the most part, nobody's paying 26%. Do your research. If a financial institution is telling you they can pay you 6% and somebody you've never heard of tells you they can pay 26, something a little bit to ask yourself a real question. So look out for Ponzi schemes. And if you need more information, just Google Ponzi. There are some phenomenal Ponzi schemes out there. Sometimes they're called a pyramid scheme, but Ponzi is the way that we go. So let's take a look at what the common savings products are. So savings accounts, usually the first product that any of us use, and they usually have a very low interest rate, but they're a nice place to start. Keep your money safe. Then we go to certificates of deposit. We normally call them CDs, not the kind that you play. And this is a specialized deposit made at a bank or another financial institution. And you put your money in for a specified period of time. Let the bank or the financial institution use it. They pay you a higher interest rate than the savings account for the use of your money, which they are now handing out in the form of loans. So the longer the maturity, the longer the time that you're letting the bank keep it, the higher the interest rate you earn. If you don't keep your money in for the specified time that you agreed to, then the more than likely that you'll pay a penalty. Then there's the money market funds. These are specialized funds that are invested usually in extremely short-term bonds. They pay a higher interest rate than a savings account, sometimes oddly enough less than a CD, but these are funds that are guaranteed by the US government, or if the money market fund is investing in things guaranteed by the US government, then it's a low risk. But you might have to keep in a higher minimum balance to get a higher risk. Oddly enough, Series E bonds are still alive and well. They were called war bonds before, but those are issued by the federal government. You can buy them for as little as $25, and they never lose their value. So this is one of the things that my mother did for all of her grandchildren, and I can tell you that her grandchildren disliked her intensely because you couldn't do anything with it at the time. And what was that? A piece of paper. But speaking for my 3 adult children, when they got into a pinch in their late teens and early 20s, they sure thanked grandma because there were some savings bonds there and they hadn't touched them and they were ripe for the pickings. So those savings bonds are sometimes some nice things to do because you're buying them at half the value. So wherever you start, and we usually start, this can be a continuum, not the Series E bonds, they're sort of off to the left, but your savings accounts, and then build up to a CD, then build up to a money market fund. It's a nice way to start that saving process. Well, let's figure out just exactly what your stock market IQ is. So Maria, if you can put that stock market IQ into the chat box, it's a writable, fillable PDF. And there are, it's a quick true and false. And some of them will make you laugh. But let's take a moment to whip through that if we can. Let's take another minute and a half, and then we'll see what our answers are. So I just chatted with Maria in the chat box to let her know that I will provide you with the answers. I'm going to talk you through it, but my PowerPoint just shows true false. So just absorb versus thinking, oh, I got to write down this information. I will provide you with the actual answers. So let's get started. So our very first one, I'm sure that most of you figured that was false. But oftentimes we don't know what a stock is. Well, it's an ownership of a company. So one stock, you have a teensy bit of ownership, but these are sold in public markets around the world. So any of us now can buy a stock. The internet has made that possible, and your students can buy stock. The next one is indeed false because, as I just mentioned, anyone can invest in the stock market through mutual funds or individual purchases. And very wealthy people actually make up the smallest portion of stock market investors. Once upon a time, you needed a broker. You needed to have connections in the financial world, and you had a broker, and it sounded so sexy and important. Now you can just do it all by yourself. Indeed, number 3 is false because the US government does not sell stocks of private companies. These are private company stocks are sold in stock markets, and the government has nothing to do with stock. 4 is also false. In reality, the prices of stocks on the market change as supply and demand. So more people who want to buy Apple, the price goes up. Nobody's interested in Apple today. It stays the same or possibly shifts. So they can change at any rate, or they can stay the same for a long time. How much they go up doesn't forecast how much they may fall. Over the long term, stocks have averaged about 9%, higher than you're getting in your savings account. Number 5 is also false. Stock prices will usually not fall if the company remains successful and other investments don't become more attractive. Stock prices reflect the interest of investors. And so the law of gravity does not apply. Number 6 is true. So just as a refresher, bulls are the people who think the market will continue to rise. Bears think the stock prices are likely to fall, and pigs are people who try to make a killing on the market in a short amount of time and tend to get slaughtered. So we do use those 3 terms. A lot of day traders turn out to be pigs. So they lose their money quickly on high risk investments. Number 7 is false. Stock prices are set by the supply and demand for stocks. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, regulates the stock markets to ensure honest practices are followed and accurate business information is provided to buyers and sellers. But that's their only role. Number 8 is true because stock markets exist in many different countries, obviously with different time zones. So the reality is that Europe and Asia markets are open and in operation while the US markets are closed. So you'll start to hear news about, oh my gosh, we're all waiting for the Japanese market to open. And that's what we're looking at because this is happening 24/7. Number 9 is also true because for a variety of reasons, a company may wish to have its stock price increase in value. And one way to do that is to start making a demand. Everybody goes, oh my gosh, look, somebody's buying XYZ. So is it ethical or immoral? No. The fact is that this is just how this game is played. Number 10 is false. All good stocks are available for sale in large quantities. Just because someone he currently owns doesn't prevent investors from buying the stocks. New investors just have to offer a more attractive price so that somebody will sell to them. 11 is false. The price of stocks rise and fall depending upon economic conditions and business success. And so many people have lost money by buying stocks when prices were high and selling them after the prices fell. So there is a rise in the stock market, but it is not a sure way of making money. Over the long term, many people will say, if you're in it for the long haul, it's a good investment. Number 12 is false. New issues of stock are purchased by investment bankers, that's the primary market, who offer stocks to be resold to the public. So we all in this class are secondary market. So when you see an IPO, which is the initial opportunity to buy stock, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to get in and get it. No, you're not. You're the secondary market. 13 is false because many of you know about Martha Stewart. Insider stock trading refers to the illegal practices of people related to a company who find out important information about the company, and that information will affect the stock market price, and then they buy or sell that stock before that information becomes available to the general public. So it could be an accountant who knows that a company's profits are going to go higher than anticipated. It could be somebody who knows that it's going to go lower. So it's an insider. And Martha Stewart was the prime example of being accused, at least, of being an insider and spent some time in prison as a result. Number 14 is true because the reality is that many electronic methods exist that allow people to buy stocks without talking directly to anybody. And that's the opportunity that is out there. Number 15, false. Oddly enough, the stock market is a very small part of the economy. It really can't cause economic growth or decline. It's one leading indicator of the economy. So when the stock market goes up, it does signal that many people think that the economy will grow in the near future. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. The stock market cannot make people or companies in the economy improve their production of real goods and services. So hopefully you did well on that. And again, we'll get the absolute answers to you momentarily. But let's talk about what the common investment products are. Stocks, and that's again represents a share of ownership in the company. You become a shareholder or a stockholder if you buy stock. And we make money as an investor in the stock market two ways. The first one is we might receive a dividend. So we get a dividend from Ford Motor Company every quarter as they make money, and we put that into the bank. We can also roll that dividend back into the company to buy more stock. So that's a payment from the earnings of the corporation. Now, a company doesn't have to pay you a dividend. It can make a decision not to. But the other way that we make money is that we sell our stock when the stock price goes up. So we bought it at $35 a share. It goes up to $45. We sell and we make that $10. So remember that the price of the stock will go up when there are more people who want to buy the stock, demand, and there are people who want to sell it, supply. Bonds are corporations and governments, like people, sometimes need to borrow money. So it might be a bond. You'll hear about an airport who wants to build a new tarmac. So that's going to be through a bond. You hear about school bonds quite a bit. They want to increase or build more buildings. Those are bonds as well. So if you buy a bond, you're lending money to these corporations or governments. As a bond investor, you pay a set amount of money. So you might buy a $5,000 bond, you might buy a $10,000 bond. And then the government or the company agrees to pay back a set amount, promises to pay it back, all of it to you on a certain date with a certain amount of interest. These are known as fixed income securities because the amount of income the bond will generate each year is fixed or set when the bond is sold. So as an investor, you know in advance how much you're going to be paid back. And you know that not only will how much you'll get back from interest, but that you'll get back the total amount that you originally invested. But bonds take a long time. They're usually 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So they are not liquid. And it's possible that inflation will zap that bond and suddenly it will not be as valuable to you as if you had had that money in hand sooner. But they pay a higher rate of interest than CDs, savings accounts, or money market accounts. So it might be worth your while. Now, mutual funds allow you as an investor to have someone else manage your money. So you get to invest in stocks and bonds without doing all the homework necessary to pick those individual companies. So they're a good option for people who don't have enough money to invest in a number of stocks and bonds necessary to achieve diversification. We don't want all of our eggs in one basket. So we'd like to have some in orange juice, some in airplanes, some in technology. We don't want it all in orange juice because when the frost hits the orange crop in Florida, we're done. So we want to have a little bit of everything, as it were. And it's a financial strategy to reduce risk by investing in several different companies or types of investments. So we also, as I say, we don't have to know a whole lot, but we do have to know what our risk is, because that's the first step when we're looking at mutual funds. If you've had an opportunity to be involved in that, they say to you, so do you want low risk, medium, or high risk? And they're going to manage it for you based on your risk tolerance. So you want to be able to know what's your risk tolerance. And it may change, as we said earlier on, it may change based on your age, your current income, what your goals are. But we always encourage you to be very clear that you understand how much you're willing to risk and that you know that it may change, but today I'm only willing to risk this much. And that's okay. And your students need to be aware of their risk because some people go, oh yeah, do it all. John started the conversation by saying, how many of you have already invested in cryptocurrency? Well, that's a risky buy. Doesn't mean you shouldn't, but you should be really clear about how do you feel about numbers inside of a computer? Because again, one of my favorite stories, I think the guy was in Australia who wanted the his town to completely go through the landfill because his cryptocurrency was in his on the mother drive, motherload, you know what I'm trying to say, motherboard of his computer, which was in the landfill. He was done. So just a small conversation about that. So let's look at this risk pyramid.
CJ?
Yeah.
I have a question because you're talking about bonds and mutual funds. Where do IRAs and the Roth IRAs fall in terms of all of that?
So they're usually
like 401ks, or for us, it would be 403b.
Yeah. So they're investing in bonds and stocks. So when you are sitting down with your person who manages that 401k for you, you do want to have a conversation with them because when you first started and signed up, you should have been able to say, I'm a low risk person. So could you just be sure that we're talking about this kind of stock? You might have said, I'm a high risk, go for the technology, go for the overseas, let's make it happen. So you have a choice, you should, anytime that you are investing, whether it's an IRA or a Roth IRA or a 401k, The people managing that function for you should be talking to you and saying to you, here's what we are investing in the low risk. Here's what we're investing in medium risk.
So are they kind of like a mutual fund in that you're investing in a group
Yes,
of
they
things?
always, yeah, they
They
always
do.
invest in mutual funds. So that's
Okay.
how, I mean, you get to pick and you get to say, I'm going to be risky today. I'm frisky risky. I'm going to do those crazy technology stocks. Or, you know, give me the blue chip. That's all I'm doing. I'm just staying tight. You pick and they'll tell you, because with each of those risks comes a rate of return.
Okay.
So you can say, you know, I'm 65. I'm going to give it 3 more years. I don't want any risk. Just let me have this. You can say I'm 25. Sky's the limit. Let me see what's out there. So thanks for that question, Liz.
So basically, just because I'm clear,
Mhm.
so a mutual fund is something that anybody can invest in, right? I could go to Wells Fargo and sit down with their financial person and invest in the Wells Fargo mutual funds, right?
Yes, if you're talking to their investment companies. So let's be absolutely understand that when banks were able to support investments, those are risks. It's not like your bank account, which is covered by the FDIC insurance. So
Right.
you want to make absolutely certain that you're talking to somebody who knows what they're talking about, because any investment is a risk. There is no guarantee. Your chances of losing your money are good. So
So
when you put your money in Wells Fargo's bank account, you will be insured up to $250,000 if something happens to the bank, like they're robbed or they burn up or something.
but the mutual fund is not. And I could use, and then I think what still is confusing to me, and I don't know if I'm taking up everybody else's time, but you know, is the mutual fund that I bought with, say, some cash, my tax refund, let's call it, versus the 403Bs that we started when we were hired on here, right? Versus the IRA and the Roth IRA, which I just found out the difference between those the other day. So are they all the same? Because they're all forms of mutual funds. Are they all different? I know the 403B is a retirement, so the tax laws are a little different.
Yeah. So
I'm
let me
probably
stop
making
you right
this more
there.
complicated than you want to do.
So that, Liz, that's the difference. So my overarching answer to you is that all of those instruments are all investing in mutual funds or bonds.
Okay.
The difference in each of those instruments relates primarily to the tax implications.
Okay. Got it. That helps then. Now I understand. So you basically, the word is the tool by which I invested in the stock market.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so
That helps me to understand the difference between those things. And then
the difference is eligibility, time, penalty to get out of, and tax implications.
Right. But each of the words is a tool.
Yeah. What they are doing, all of them are investing in mutual funds. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Liliana. I'm glad because I still get a little uncertain about. Yeah. So do you mind, since I asked and I saw Liliana, I think this is a really good one because people throw around IRA and Roth IRA, and the distinction between them is very interesting because we're all not 15. So can you tell everybody?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to bungle it.
No, go for it.
So an IRA is when you invest and then you get taxed when you take the money out. So I think of that like my retirement investments, where my 403B is kind of like a form of an IRA where I'll get taxed on it when I get paid after 65, if I make it to that age. And then the Roth IRA is where you get taxed, but then you put the money in and you don't pay taxes when you take it out. So and again, I think that's probably why I'm asking. So then the government never taxes you on your interest in a Roth IRA? Or how do they tax you? Are they taxing you for capital gains throughout the life of the Roth IRA?
You know, I'm not going to answer that because I'm suddenly confusing myself. So let me have that answer for you next week.
Okay, but you see why I'm
Yep.
asking, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
I do. I do.
that's what threw me when I found
Yeah.
out the difference. I was like, wait a minute, where's the taxing on the interest?
Yeah.
The Roth IRA, because the Roth IRA sounds like the best bet because you paid your taxes up front, but then you're earning compound interest and you're not paying taxes on the compound interest when you withdraw. So are they taxing you annually in the same way that you get taxed on your mutual funds?
So can I chime in real quick?
You bet.
So one of them is pre-tax dollars, and that's going to be your 403B. That means that you're not getting taxed today, but you're going to get taxed when you take it out. And the other one is post-tax dollars, meaning you invest in it after you get paid on your check. So they've already taxed you on the money. And that's why there's a limit of how much you can invest in that type of an account per year. So since you already are doing it with post-tax dollars, it's after you get your paycheck, you take some of that money that would go into your checking account, you put it into that account, it's going to grow tax-free, and you're not going to get taxed when you get it out again at your 65.
So Marina, part of why I'm asking though is this. I invested at one point in mutual funds, some taxed dollars, okay? But every year I have to pay capital gains. And so what I want to know is why the Roth IRA is not getting capital gains tax. Or said another way, I have a significant amount of money in savings and I just did my taxes and I had to list that as income.
It
And
depends
I got taxed on it.
It depends on the vehicle that you have it in. That's why the Roth has limits. That's why the investment accounts that are meant for retirement have limits as to how much you can put in there. And then everything else that you're doing, because you could continue to buy stocks and buy mutual funds and buy index funds and buy EFTSs and bonds. But if you have those in retirement accounts, then they're treated differently, right? Than if it's just an investment account. And that's probably what's going on for you.
So I guess that's where I'm a little uncertain still about the Roth IRAs but they're not retirement accounts. My understanding is you can withdraw at any point. Am I correct,
Yes, you can.
CJ?
You are correct.
So back to my initial question, are those Roth IRAs then not being taxed in the way that, say, my emergency fund is being taxed? Because my emergency fund sits in a savings account and it gets taxed every year. So if that's the truth, then I would ask CJ right now, would I be wiser to move my emergency fund into a Roth? Because I can still access it.
And what
my
CJ
6
would
month
say is
savings.
that I don't give out financial information, financial
Right,
advice.
I know that, but you see,
Yeah. Yeah,
that's why I'm
I do.
asking the question, because I can just use my choice.
Yeah.
I can make the risk assessment and do that, right?
Right.
But I don't have
Absolutely.
the answer to that question about the taxation, and maybe Marina does.
Yeah. So I'm going to have you hold that and I'll do a little research myself. And if Marina helps out, thank you, Marina, for your comments. I appreciate it, but I know that time is of the essence.
Taking up everybody's time, but
no, those are great questions. Really appreciate it. So let's just take a look at this risk pyramid. It's always your choice, but some of us are going to be down here at the cash, bank savings, bank certificates of deposit. Some of us might move on up, but my favorite is collectibles, because those are absolutely the highest risk because they are determined by the purchaser's interest, not by the sellers. So if you have Beanie Babies or Cabbage Dolls or whatever you've got, and you hope that somebody wants all of them, the question is there a purchaser out there who values them as much as you do? Chances are no. So what are the keys to investment success? Develop a plan linked to your financial goals. Diversification is what keeps us sane and keeps us safe. Invest for the long term. If you're a day trader, more power to you, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about what are your financial plans. Have realistic expectations. It is rare that somebody makes a killing, remember those pigs, that slaughtered issue, in a day, though day traders will tell you they do. But what are your expectations? So if you're going to do that rule of 72, know what you're talking about. Monitor the performance of your portfolio annually. Just because you have somebody else managing it doesn't take the accountability off of you. Pay attention. Avoid the too good to be true. Don't invest in something you don't understand. There are also people who say, invest in things that you like. So when I talk to young people, I talk about the fact you're wearing an entire Nike outfit. Why don't you get a couple shares in Nike? Because you're paying Nike every day to buy their stuff. Might as well invest in it. I have people who invest only in green. They want only companies that work with the ecological issues. They don't want to invest in companies that are promoting what they think is slave labor in India or whatever the cause may be. So not only don't invest in something you don't understand, but invest in something that you believe in. So the recap, sooner you begin saving and investing, the more wealth you'll build. It's important to evaluate and understand the risks and the rewards of both savings and investment options. And the one that I hope that you'll take away today, and especially with your students, is that saving and investing can be achieved by anyone, regardless of your current income status. So what are your challenges this week? Well, I'd love to have you consider the options available to you to pay yourself first. So maybe you hadn't thought about an automatic deposit, a transfer. Maybe you hadn't thought about several of the ones we looked at. Make a plan to establish and maintain an emergency fund. Go ahead and do that calculation, ladies and gentlemen. See what you need. And increase your investment knowledge. There's so much on the internet that you could be looking at. And if you want to start at what I call really basic but fabulous information, Google young investors. There's a lot of great material written for young people around investment that I think is much more easily understood than some of the stuff for adults. Next week is managing credit and debt. So wahoo. Thank you all for staying on. Liz, thank you for those questions. And I appreciate any questions, but especially appreciate some comments in the chat box about your takeaway from today. And Liz, I've got you on the radar to check that answer out for you. But if there are also some other questions that you have, or if you need some, we went pretty fast through this. So if there's some things that you want to ask, go ahead and put those in the chat. And again, thank you so much for spending more time with me today than I was expecting.
Thank you so much, CJ. Thank you so much for that great question.
You bet.
Appreciate it. I'll go ahead and stop recording now.